If self-awareness is so important, why is it so hard to see ourselves clearly? And more importantly, what might you be protecting by not seeing yourself? Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to The Sacred Flame. In the first episode, we explored a powerful question. Do you actually know who you are? And in the last episode, we talked about some of the myths and truths about therapy, what it is and what it isn't. Today, I want to go even deeper because once people begin this journey of self-discovery and self-reflection, something very common happens. They start to realize self-awareness is not as easy as it sounds. The Sacred Flame podcast is intended for educational and inspirational purposes only. Listening does not establish a therapeutic relationship, and this is not a substitute for mental health counseling, medical advice, or professional care. If you're experiencing a crisis or need immediate support, please contact your local emergency number or the appropriate crisis hotline in your area. Take care of yourself. You are not alone. Welcome to The Sacred Flame. I'm Latoya St. Pierre, therapist, yoga teacher, and spiritual midwife. This is your space to slow down, tend the fire within, and reconnect with the wisdom that already lives inside of you. Let's begin. One of the most challenging parts of personal growth is self-awareness. So today, we're going to explore why that is. One of the most important things to understand is this. Most people are not resisting awareness because they don't want to grow. They're resisting awareness because it threatens how they see themselves. We all carry an internal sense of identity, who I am, what I believe, how I show up in the world. And that identity often feels like stability. There's a comfort that it provides. So when new information challenges that identity, it can feel uncomfortable. Not just intellectually, but emotionally. Because if I begin to see myself differently, then something inside of me has to shift. And the mind doesn't always experience that as growth. Sometimes it experiences it as a loss. This is where defense mechanisms come in. And I want to say this gently. Defense mechanisms are not a sign that something is wrong with you. They are signs that something inside of you is trying to protect you. Sometimes we avoid certain truths. Sometimes we minimize. Sometimes we rationalize. Sometimes we focus on other people instead of ourselves. And often this happens automatically. Not because we're unwilling to grow, but because a part of us has learned that certain awareness feels unsafe. Another reason self-awareness is difficult is something called cognitive dissonance. This is the discomfort we feel when two things don't match. For example, what I believe versus how I behave, or how I see myself versus what my actions reflect. Now, that discomfort can be very subtle, but instead of sitting with it, many people try to resolve it quickly, not by changing behavior, but by adjusting the narrative or the story they tell themselves, because it's often easier to protect the story than to confront the truth. And this is something I often explore with clients. I'll ask, what's the story you're telling yourself about this? Because once we create a narrative, the mind and even the ego can grip tightly to it, whether it's fully true or not. Now, I want to pause here and make an important connection. Self-awareness is not just about insight. It's about presence. Because once you become aware of something, you also have to stay with it. And for many people, especially those who have experienced trauma, presence does not always feel safe. So the challenge is not just, can I see this? The deeper question becomes, can I tolerate being with what I see? In trauma-informed work, we often talk about something called the window of tolerance. This is the range where your nervous system can feel grounded, present, and regulated. When something pushes you outside of that window, you may shut down, dissociate, become overwhelmed, or mentally escape. So sometimes what looks like a lack of self-awareness is actually a nervous system trying to protect you, which means self-awareness is not just cognitive, it's physiological, and it requires safety. And this is where self-compassion becomes essential. Research by Kristen Neff, who is a leading researcher in self-compassion, shows that self-compassion is associated with greater emotional resilience, reduced anxiety and depression, and increased psychological flexibility. But beyond the research, self-compassion creates something even more important. It creates safety within the self. Because without compassion, awareness can quickly turn into self-criticism. And when that happens, people stop looking. Tara Brach speaks about something called radical self-compassion, which is the ability to meet yourself, even in your most uncomfortable moments, without judgment, without rejection, and without turning away. And I want to be clear. Self-compassion is not avoidance. It's not about excusing behavior. It's about creating enough internal safety to stay present with truth, to say, I can see this, and I'm still safe to be with myself. Now, I also want to offer something very practical. One of the most important shifts you can begin to make is learning to distinguish between your thoughts and yourself. Many people are in a constant dialogue with their minds, but they never question it. They assume, if I think it, it must be true. But part of self-awareness is stepping back and asking, what am I telling myself right now? Is this a fact or is this a story? Do I believe every thought I have? This is what we call metacognition, the ability to observe your own thinking. And in some therapeutic approaches, this is called cognitive diffusion, creating space between you and your thoughts. Because when you begin to observe your thoughts, instead of automatically identifying with them, you create space. And in that space, you create choice. There's another layer to this, and that is accountability. Self-awareness often involves recognizing our own role in patterns, in relationships, in communication, in repeated experiences. And that can be difficult because it challenges the part of us that wants to feel right, justified, or certain. But awareness doesn't always feel validating. Sometimes it feels humbling, and that's part of the process. At the core of all of this is your relationship with yourself. Research in psychology consistently shows that people who have greater self-awareness, higher self-compassion, and a more stable internal sense of self tend to experience better emotional regulation, healthier relationships, and greater overall well-being. Because the way you relate to yourself becomes the foundation of how you relate to everything else. So, I want to invite you to pause for a moment and just consider this question. What might you be protecting by not seeing yourself clearly? And I want to be clear, this is not about judgment. This is about curiosity. Because often underneath resistance, there's something that simply needs to feel safe enough to be seen. Self-awareness is not about criticizing yourself. It's not about becoming perfect, and it's not about constantly analyzing everything you do. It's about learning to meet yourself more honestly, with enough awareness to see your patterns, and enough compassion to stay present with them. because that is where real change begins. Remember, wherever you are on your journey, stay safe and stay sovereign. Thank you for joining me on The Sacred Flame. I hope this conversation offered you something to carry into your own journey, whether that's clarity, courage, or simply a reminder that you are not alone. If this episode resonated, please share it with someone you love, follow the podcast, and leave a review. It helps this flame reach more hearts. To connect with me, find me on Instagram at @MasteringYouLLC. You can email me at info@masteringyou.org, or you can simply visit my website, masteringyou.org. Until next time, remember, the flame is already lit. Keep tending it. This podcast is for educational and inspirational purposes only. It is not a substitute for therapy, medical advice, or professional care.